This was no act of charity, nor a loan laced with hidden debts. Instead, Burkina Faso and Bangladesh struck a deal based on mutual respect, need, and a shared refusal to play by the old rules. Together, they rewrote the script of global trade, replacing dependency with dignity. Yet the real revolution was invisible. For the first time, cotton picked by Burkina Faso hands journeyed straight to the garment factories of Bangladesh, leaping past the old, Western-controlled routes that had defined the global market for generations. The middlemen, the brokers who dictated prices and controlled the rules, were left behind, their power suddenly uncertain. What if the most important revolution of 2025 began not with weapons or ballots, but with a handshake in the red-dusted cotton fields of West Africa? Picture tractors, not tanks, rolling through the soil of Burkina Faso. In that July, the air trembled, not with the echoes of conflict, but with the low hum of new machines and the hope of transformation. The stakes reached beyond economics. They touched on something deeper, agency. For once, contracts arrived in the language of the harvesters, not in the distant colonial tongues of Europe. Farmers and workers, ordinary people, could finally see their value written in terms they understood. Presidents watched as sovereignty was redefined beneath the blazing African sun, not by outside decree, but by the choices of their own citizens. Before the revolution, Burkina Faso's cotton was trapped in a web of middlemen and foreign brokers. Let's unravel how those chains were forged and why breaking them changed everything. If we overlook moments like this, we risk missing the quiet revolutions that will decide who gets to shape the future. These are the turning points that redefine not just the flow of goods and money, but the very meaning of freedom, justice, and self-respect across continents. So, what truly happened in the cotton fields of Burkina Faso, and why might that matter for the way the world measures power, fairness, and freedom itself? To understand, we must first see the invisible chains that once bound this nation to the old order. For generations, Burkina Faso lingered in the shadows of the global economy. But why did a nation so rich in land and labor remain so poor? No armies occupied Burkina Faso, but dependency crept in through paperwork and promises. Loans came with conditions, reforms that served outside interests, not local needs. One signature could mean new textbooks or empty clinics. The fate of villages hinged on the approval of strangers. Infrastructure was nearly non-existent. Remote communities were stranded by roads that washed away with the rains. Crops spoiled in darkness for lack of electricity. Sickness became fatal when clinics were days away. Over time, hardship became routine. Hope grew distant, replaced by quiet endurance. Burkina Faso farmers rose with the sun, toiling until dusk, growing cotton, panning for gold. Yet, after months of sweat, their bounty vanished for pennies on the dollar. The raw wealth flowed out in caravans and crates, while the country imported costly machines and spare parts, almost always on credit. Before a single harvest was sold, villages were already in debt to distant lenders. The rules of this game never set in Ouagadougou. Instead, they were written far away, in polished boardrooms in Paris, Brussels, and Washington. Foreign officials, who had never felt the dust of a Burkina Faso field, drafted contracts in languages few villagers spoke. In a single generation, farmers lost not only their earnings, but also their say in how to shape their lives. But systems, no matter how entrenched, are not unbreakable. What happens when a nation stands up and dares to rewrite the rules? In July of 2025, Burkina Faso made a choice that would defy expectations and send shockwaves far beyond its borders. The story begins with a single radical agreement. In July of 2025, a quiet revolution unfolded beneath the blazing sky of Burkina Faso. History did not announce itself with fanfare, but its consequences would rumble far beyond the cotton rows. This was the real price. Generations trapped in a cycle where their labor made others wealthy. while they themselves remained voiceless and poor. Pride shrank, ambition faded, and survival became the only dream allowed. Staying in this system cost more than money. It eroded dignity, self-worth, and the freedom to imagine a different life. On sun-baked earth, two nations, Burkina Faso and Bangladesh, met face-to-face, equals under the open sky. No Western brokers, no middlemen siphoning value. Here, African cotton would travel directly to South Asian looms, with prices reflecting sweat and soil, not distant speculation. 400 tractors rumbling through villages, 68,000 tons of fertilizer stacked high, solar pumps coaxing life from parched ground. These were the tools of empowerment, not handouts. Every shipment, every lesson was a stake in a shared tomorrow. The change was swift and unmistakable. For the first time in decades, farmers received just prices for their harvest. Yet the transformation ran deeper than profit. Alongside new contracts came technology, tractors, solar irrigation, hands-on training. This was not aid nor charity, but mutual investment, a declaration that respect, not pity, could shape the future. Contracts appeared in the languages of the people who tilled the land. For the first time, men and women could read and truly understand the contours of their own destinies. No more blind signatures. The power of choice shifted from distant capitals to weathered hands long denied agency. The world watched with a wary eye, calculating, not cheering. But not everyone welcomed this new order. Powerful interests abroad watched closely, their own stakes threatened by a world changing without their permission. Young people and engineers crossed borders, side by side in learning and building. Together, they devised new ways to fend off pests, store cotton safely, and cut waste from farm to factory. Word spread quickly. If cotton could be traded fairly, perhaps gold, cocoa, even lithium could follow. Promise and peril walked together. Success would mean shattering a century's chains of dependency. Failure could spark reprisals, renewed isolation, or sabotage from those vested in the old order. This was far more than a trade deal. It was a wager for dignity, sovereignty, and the right to determine one's worth. Most international leaders dismissed the Burkina Faso-Bangladesh deal as minor, its impact confined to a remote corner of the globe. But inside ministries and boardrooms, unease spread. This was a breach in the old order, a partnership that broke the script, direct and fair, with no gatekeepers. Resistance surfaced quietly. Foreign investors hesitated, stalling new projects. Aid agencies rewrote their terms, adding hidden strings and lengthening timelines. Regional banks offered loans, but with subtle warnings, signaling that those who defied tradition might face isolation. Yet in the cotton fields of Burkina Faso, life was changing. New tractors carved orderly rows through red earth. Young people, once set on departure, now found reasons to stay. Hands-on training, steady jobs, and a sense of pride in their craft. For the first time, villagers shaped their own destinies, no longer tethered to distant capitals. The message unsettled the global stage. The old system, power maintained through dependence, suddenly looked brittle. This agreement was proof. Sovereignty could be reclaimed, not by protest, but by rewriting the rules and insisting on honest value for honest work. But on the ground, the story was far from over. The coming weeks would test the courage and resolve of everyone involved. The echoes traveled far. In cafes from Dakar to Delhi, conversations shifted. If dignity could be restored in one village, could it ripple outward? Was this the crack in a century-old system of extraction? A glimpse of partnership, not patronage? But every gain drew new pressure. Pushback gathered strength among those with the most to lose. Could this fragile experiment outlast the world's quiet resistance? Or would it buckle under the weight of legacy expectations? The stakes reached beyond cotton. At risk was the core of dignity and self-reliance, the hope that ordinary people everywhere might reclaim the worth of their labor and reshape their future. When you rewrite the rules in your own language, the future stops being an inheritance. It becomes something you build, word by word. What can we extract from the quiet revolution unfolding in Burkina Faso? This is not only a story about a country, but a challenge to anyone who wants their voice to echo and their value to register in the world. Real sovereignty is not defined by borders or flags alone. It is communities taking charge of what they create and demanding that creation be honored. When you set the price of your labor, in your own words and on your own terms, you step out of the shadow of resource and into the light of partnership. This is precisely what happened in Burkina Faso. When farmers signed contracts written in Moore, their mother tongue, they gained agency over their lives. When tractors arrived, not as gifts, but as tools fairly earned, it signaled that dignity, not dependency, was finally at the center of the deal. Partnerships grounded in dignity, not charity, lead to lasting prosperity. The agreement with Bangladesh was not just a trade arrangement, it was a reset. Knowledge and technology flowed in both directions. Neither side was reduced to a silent supplier or a helpless recipient. Instead, they became co-creators, exchanging skills, unlocking opportunities, and raising each other up. Infrastructure and education flourished because they were crafted by local hands and shaped by local minds, not imposed from above. Solar irrigation, vocational schools, and even new roads became the fruits of partnership, not pity. For the first time, young engineers and farmers saw their expertise recognized, and local pride grew alongside new economic strength. When people are partners, not recipients, they gain the power to envision and realize a different future. This is bigger than nations. Anyone, be you a farmer, a student, or an entrepreneur, can demand to be seen, heard, and respected. The courage to insist on fair terms, to define your own worth, to seek partnership rather than pity, has the power to change your life, your community, and perhaps even your country. But the lesson runs deeper. Much of the world's comfort is built on the invisible labor of the many. Cotton picked for shirts, minerals mined for phones, food harvested for distant tables. What happens when those workers, those communities, finally claim their worth? The world must face a new justice, one that refuses to hide exploitation behind low prices and distant contracts. So what does this mean for you and for the future of global trade and justice? If we fail to learn these lessons, the old cycles of exploitation and dependency will grind on, leaving dignity and opportunity out of reach for millions. But if we follow the path Burkina Faso has begun, we may uncover new ways to transform our relationship to value, work, and justice, wherever we live, whatever we do. The world is watching, but the outcome depends on what we do next. The revolution is quiet, but its questions are loud, and they are coming for all of us. History is not only written by presidents and CEOs, it is shaped in the quiet bravery of fields and the hands that tend them, far from the spotlight. Consider this. What if the greatest revolutions do not roar through the streets, but pass softly, hidden in the small print of a contract, or in the trembling hands of someone signing a name for the first time? In July 2025, a deal between Burkina Faso and Bangladesh was not just about who gets paid. It struck at the very meaning of freedom and dignity, redrawing the boundaries of power in our world. This story does not end at the edge of the cotton fields. It stretches all the way to you. Every system, every market, every rule about who gets what stands only as long as people accept things as they are. But when ordinary people refuse, when they choose to define value for themselves, the world order can begin to tilt. That shift may be silent, but it can reshape destinies, including your own. If we look away, nothing changes. the cycles of exploitation and dependency continue, quietly stripping people of their future and their voice. But if we look closer and honor the meaning in these small, silent victories, we may see the path toward new kinds of prosperity and self-respect, not just for Burkina Faso, but for communities everywhere. Can you see the dignity in a farmer's hands, or do you still measure worth by the stamp of a Western broker? Will you notice when power is reclaimed not through force, but by rewriting contracts in the language of those who harvest and in the local tongue? It takes courage, sometimes a deeper courage than war, to demand a fair price, to break cycles of dependency, and to insist that your labor is worth more than what old systems dictate. But let us not simply end there. To see the true depth of this revolution, let us step back and place it within a longer arc of history. In the end, history will ask not only who made the deals, but who noticed when the world began to change. One handshake, one harvest, and one new definition of value at a time. Your voice, your awareness, your role in shaping just systems. These are what hang in the balance wherever you live. The ability to recognize and speak of the quiet rise of freedom and dignity is not a question for someone else. It is a challenge to you. Will you see it? Will you tell others what you have seen? To understand how radical this is, imagine a world where Latin American coffee growers sell directly to Turkish roasters, or Indonesian tin miners set prices together with South Korean tech firms without Western brokers in the middle. This is the future Burkina Faso is pointing toward, a world where those who create value claim a fairer share of it. Or consider the precedent set by the Bandung Conference of 1955. Then, leaders from 29 Asian and African countries gathered in Indonesia to assert their independence from colonial powers. They called for cooperation among themselves, South-South partnerships, and dreamed of a world where nations could trade as equals. The cotton deal between Burkina Faso and Bangladesh is a living descendant of that dream, a concrete step toward a world where value is set by those who produce, not just those who consume. Consider, for example, the Green Revolution of the 20th century. In the 1960s and 70s, countries like India and Mexico transformed their agricultural sectors by introducing new varieties of crops, fertilizers, and irrigation techniques. While these efforts lifted millions out of hunger, they often came at the price of dependency on foreign seed companies and expensive chemical inputs. Who controlled the technology controlled the harvest. Many smallholders lost their land, unable to afford the new model of farming. The story of Burkina Faso is different. Here, the tools are not imposed, but chosen. The tractors, solar pumps, and training programs were negotiated as part of a two-way partnership, not a top-down mandate. But history also offers cautionary tales. In the early 2000s, when Zambia resisted the conditions of World Bank loans and sought to renegotiate its copper contracts, it faced a barrage of economic pressure. Aid was suspended, credit ratings downgraded, investment dried up. The message was clear: challenge the system, and the system will push back. Burkina Faso's revolution, too, faces resistance. Already, whispers in international financial circles hint at higher interest rates, subtle trade barriers, and warnings about instability. But unlike Zambia 2 decades ago, Burkina Faso is not standing alone. It has Bangladesh, and the example it sets may encourage others to follow suit. Fourth, diversify partnerships. Burkina Faso did not turn its back on the world. It simply chose to broaden its options. By trading with Bangladesh, it signaled to Europe, the United States, and China that it would no longer be bound to a single buyer or lender. This leverage, even if modest at first, can shift the balance of power. Of course, this is not a utopia. Risks and setbacks are inevitable. For every tractor delivered, there may be breakdowns and delays. For every contract signed in the local tongue, there may be legal disputes or translation errors. History teaches us that every revolution, no matter how peaceful, is tested by adversity. The difference now is that the people of Burkina Faso and their partners in Bangladesh face these challenges as equals. What practical steps can others learn from this moment? First, insist that contracts be written in languages that all parties understand. This may seem simple, but it is revolutionary in its effect. It ensures transparency, builds trust, and prevents exploitation. Second, embed technology transfer and education at the heart of every deal. Tractors and solar pumps are important, but the real wealth lies in the knowledge of how to use and maintain them. Third, foster exchanges of people, not just goods. When young agronomists, engineers, and business people work side by side, they build relationships that outlast any single contract. Fifth, measure success not only in economic growth, but in dignity restored, skills gained, and pride rekindled. Too often, development is reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet: GDP, export volumes, loan repayments. But the real revolution is felt in the confidence of a young farmer reading her first contract, or in the laughter of children in a school built with the proceeds of fairly traded cotton. These are the metrics that matter if we care about justice and human flourishing. Scenarios like these are not mere fantasies. In 2017, after Ghana began selling its cocoa directly to chocolate makers in Switzerland and Japan, farmers' incomes rose by over 30% within 3 years. The lesson is clear. When producers gain leverage, the benefits cascade through communities, economies, and generations. Let us also imagine the ripple effects. In the year after the deal, other West African nations, Mali, Benin, and Togo, sent delegations to observe, curious about how they might adapt this model. Textile manufacturers in Bangladesh, flush with higher quality cotton, began investing in better labor conditions and environmental safeguards, knowing that their supply chain was now a partnership, not an extraction. Even European buyers, sensing the winds of change, quietly approached Burkina Faso with offers to renegotiate old contracts, this time with more respect and transparency. But change is never automatic. In the months after the Burkina Faso-Bangladesh deal, some elite traders in London and Geneva tried to undermine the new arrangement by flooding the market with cheap cotton from other sources, hoping to drive down prices and sow doubt. The response from Burkina Faso was clear. They organized cooperatives to store surplus cotton, waited out the storm, and refused to buckle. This resilience sent a message. Dignity, once claimed, is not so easily surrendered. Above all, remember that every system, no matter how entrenched, is human-made, and therefore can be remade. The story of Burkina Faso is not a miracle. It is the result of choices, courage, and collective action. It reminds us that freedom is not handed down from above, but built from the ground up, one handshake, one contract, one act of respect at a time. What can you, as a viewer or listener, do to support such revolutions, whether in West Africa or in your own backyard? Begin by asking where your clothes, food, and electronics come from. Seek out and support companies that prioritize fair trade, transparency, and direct partnerships. Use your voice to demand that governments and corporations respect the agency of those who produce the world's goods. Teach others about the hidden histories and quiet victories that sustain our everyday comfort. The future is not written. It is harvested, stitched, and built, one field, one factory, and one fair deal at a time. The quiet revolution has begun. Will you notice it? Will you join in shaping its next chapter? So the next time you dress, eat, or connect, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, whose hands made this possible? What systems shaped their fate? And what can you do today to honor their dignity, amplify their voice, and help shape a world where value is measured not just in profit, but in respect, agency, and shared prosperity? Let us close with a vision. Imagine a world where the cotton in your shirt, the cocoa in your chocolate, the lithium in your phone all carry a story, not of exploitation, but of partnership and pride. A world where every contract is a covenant between equals, and every exchange plants seeds of justice and hope. This is the quiet revolution that began in the red-dusted fields of Burkina Faso, And it is a revolution that, with attention and action, can belong to all of us.